The Gospel of Gold by G.S. Lewis. Chapter 25. Providence. There was no sign of life in the darkened lobby, and there probably wouldn't have been, even if the town was not under emergency weather lockdown. Dragonite lay draped over the reception counter where the nurse might have stood, its back bent to a U-shape in the opposite direction it was meant to. It was all wrong, all backwards. If the desk had not been in the way, Gold was certain that Dragonite's head could have touched its ankles. Horrified, he approached the ruined wreck of Dragonite's body. A sound of faint gasping reached his ears. Somehow, Dragonite was still breathing, alive but mortally wounded, and dying. Willpower alone kept it tethered to its broken body, for this was Lance's Pokemon, and quitting was not in its nature. Gold reached Dragonite's head, which was almost level with the floor, but tilted up towards the ceiling. He dropped to his knees, and the Pokemon's eyes turned slightly towards him, as if just noticing his presence. There was no more dread in his heart, only pity and shame. Where was Lance right now? "I told you to fly away," Gold whined softly, reaching out to touch the sides of Dragonite's head. "Why didn't you listen to me?" He couldn't say how it happened, but there was a flash and a tug, and suddenly he was no longer kneeling in an abandoned Pokemon Center. Instead, he stood outside, surrounded by tall grass, while gloomy clouds gathered overhead. In front of him stood a familiar-looking man, with the same spiky red hair and cape that had made him so memorable the first time. He did not smile, however, but stood and stared. "You evolved," Lance breathed. Gold looked down at his hands, his paws, orange and three-clawed. He felt the same kind of surprise that the champion did. Not that he was a human-turned Dragonite, but that he had evolved from his Dragonair form so suddenly. This is another vision, he realized, the disembodied part of himself that was really him. I think I'm experiencing the past from Dragonite's perspective. I don't know how, but I know. His Dragonite self watched as Lance put a worried hand to his chin and gazed at the lake that lay nearby. A white fin, the size of a small sail, breached the water's surface momentarily, then dipped back under. Lance frowned with recognition. I see. The evolution signal wave is broadening. It used to be just Magikarp, but now it's got you too. I need to find out where that signal is coming from. Wherever it is, it's close, and I have no doubt that the source will be disguised and heavily guarded. Dragonite Gold felt a thrill run through his body, anticipating the glorious battle to come. With his new arms, he smacked a fist into his other palm, and Lance took immediate notice. "No!" rebuked the Dragon Master quickly, swiping the air in a gesture of utter refusal. "We know too little of the enemy's strength right now. You will not fight, not after you've evolved so prematurely." Lance's answer hit Gold like a bucket of ice water to the face. He wilted at once, feeling some resentment, but more shame and humility than anything. His master must have read the crestfallen look on his face, for a consoling hand fell to rest on his shoulder, and Lance's expression softened. "We cannot afford to be hasty after all the pains we took to hide," he followed up gently. "I am hesitant to launch any kind of offensive now without outside help. There are so few people left that I trust that it will be some time yet. I will meditate on it and gather information. He patted Gold's scaly shoulder. In the meantime, you must accustom yourself to that new body of yours. Don't worry, I can still make you useful. Summon a fog to surround yourself, and be my eyes in the sky. You are sufficiently practiced in stealth after all that training with Koga. Now, you will watch out for my protection. Lance put out his other hand, so that both now rested on Gold's shoulders. Again, his expression became sharp, and he spoke with a voice that carried the command of a king. My life is in your hands, so I say once more, do not reveal yourself to fight, not unless there is no other choice. The scenery around Gold began to dissolve now, shifting to shapeless pastel colors. When his view was clear again, he still could not make things out clearly, for his surroundings were heavily obscured by a translucent gray fog. However, he could feel the muscles in his back flexing, and the wind whistled coldly all around him. He could not turn his head, but in his Dragonite mind, he knew he was flying in the clouds. Far below, his master remained concealed in the tall grass, as he had learned to do whenever he operated on the ground. Something had happened, though. Something that no past experience with Lance had prepared him for. He had seen a great winged shape appear below him, as if out of nowhere, yet impossible not to see. It was a vibrantly red bird Pokemon, exuding a golden aura, and leaving a subtle trail of rainbow colors as it went. Gold knew it was Spirit at once, but his separate Dragonite mind looked on in wonder. He himself was considered almost mythical among Pokemon, even as a Dratini, but this creature was not of the natural world. For once, he could not take his eyes off her, despite knowing that he was still charged with Lance's safety. He stared on, until she vanished quite suddenly above the lake of rage. He felt an unreasonable pang of regret, and wondered why he missed her presence already. Here was an entity whose existence he had hitherto been unaware of. And yet now, inexplicably, he found himself yearning for her. Why? Who was she? I am Spirit. Then she was right in front of him, clear as crystal in spite of the obscuring clouds, radiant with life and power. A spectrum of color broke through her outstretched wings, and the beauty of it smote him so deeply that he forgot to fly. Even Gold, in his own mind, thrilled at the overwhelming majesty of her presence. It made no difference whether this was real-time or a vision. It did not matter. Dragonite regained a little control of his wings, and Spirit spoke to him in her phantasmal voice of song and power. Servant of man, loyal and true, you are entrusted as protector of the rightful champion, she intoned. Soon your service will be required, not to your master, but to another whom you shall know. The language she spoke was not one that Gold recognized, but Dragonite did. As soon as he became aware, the ability to comprehend left him, so that he could do nothing but linger in a state of mere presence and watch through Dragonite's eyes. In a small corner of his mind, he received an impression that this knowledge was for Dragonite alone. He was being permitted an audience to this past event, but just as there were things kept between only himself and Spirit, so also were some things kept private between her and others. She looked at him then, her kindly gaze not just upon the Dragonite eyes through which he saw, but at him. And though Dragonite could not have seen him in this state, yet still, All three perceived each other and connected in that moment. The next moment, Gold was back in the dim light of the abandoned Pokemon Center. Dragonite still gazed at him, no longer from his death slouch over the reception counter, but upright on his own two legs, whole again. The Pokemon did not stand fully erect, but leaned low enough to match the height of the boy, whose hands were still upon his head. Gold let go and stepped back, and Dragonite watched him solemnly, almost reverently. "That's why you didn't fly away," Gold murmured, understanding at last. "You are not my Pokemon, but Spirit had you watch out for me when Lance and his team were engaged in their own battle. And though Machamp is still at a higher level," he raised his hands, "I may not be your trainer, but it was still my part to help you succeed." He smiled broadly, reinvigorated at the reminder that a higher power was at play and in their corner. "We've probably been called together for more than this victory, Dragonite, but here and now, it is ours to take."